We are coming in loud and clear on Facebook now. Our first ever Zoom Facebook chat. We've been doing these, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks now, and we're going to try to rotate them around the different social mediums, and have just been doing YouTube so far. But now we got the Facebook connection working to where we can go live on Facebook. So hopefully y'all can see us and hear us. We should be able to still see your chats and everything like that, just like you would a regular Facebook live video. So, send us your questions. We'll talk. It's mainly going to be a little bit of a recruiting, as far as what we have planned. Will be mainly recruiting stuff, but of course we can talk football, talk football in general, or Gamecocks talk, whatever. I mean, we're all sitting around at home together, so whatever y'all want to talk about, we'll hit it. Chris, I think first, before we get specifically to the Gamecocks, one of the more interesting, I wouldn't say news items, but at least, Chris Fowler called it informed speculation, in quotes. But Chris Fowler, ESPN, of course, very connected within the fabric of college football, went on Instagram. I think that was actually yesterday. He posted the video, but and was talking about the options for college football this year. And I think, first of all, before we sort of get into the options, and I got to make sure our link is working while you talk, Chris, but the first thing he said that I thought was most interesting is that by, I believe he said end of May is what the first date is that we basically need to have an idea of what we're doing, without even going into what the options are going to be for college football. End of May is sort of the drop dead date as far as making a decision, because, we think of these things in terms of, well, if everything's fine by August, we can play college football. But really, you have to back up from that as far as when you're going to start planning for how these things are going to play out. So, what were before we get into the details of the options that college football may have, I thought that was interesting and gives us sort of a clear barrier date for when we need to have a much better feel for where things are at.
It was. And, I guess that aligns sort of with, what the SEC, for instance, has done with, shutting down in-person recruiting until the end of May and team activities until the end of May. And it seems like there's some cohesiveness across college football, or certainly, just talking about the SEC, but across college football too. And, shutting things down for a particular set of time. And it's been two different, been a couple different shifts by the SEC to expand to now this new May 31st date. And so it makes sense, because you're right, Wes. It's not just, all right, we're sitting here and it's late July. All right, everybody can go back to practice and we'll start the season either on time, or even if we get to late July and it's okay. All right, everybody back to practice, figure it out, and let's play ball on October 1st or whatever. It's just not feasible, because I think Chris Fowler said it well. It's a very complex sport. When you talk about college football, there's so many different things in the fabric of that. It's a student athlete, so it's not just a bunch of professionals. And I'm not even talking about them being unpaid, and we're not getting into that debate. I'm just talking about from a time standpoint. They go to school, they have to, they train, you need to make sure your players are in shape, from a legal standpoint at every school. Are you giving them enough time? The NCAA, are you giving them enough time to train their bodies or retrain their bodies? The coaches feel like, okay, we got enough time with our players to restart. So you got all those factors. You also have to figure out, you got to give schools enough time logistically to move things around or to figure out ticket sales, whatever it may be. And you also have to account recruiting. Like right now, the entire recruiting calendar has changed, because there's been, there's no spring or summer official visits. There's going to be no camps at South Carolina, and a bunch of other places as well. When is in-person recruiting going to start? Because you do have to allow for that in college football, and it's a huge part of it. Obviously, it's integral. And so they have to figure out, hey, when is in-person recruiting going to start? And so when you get to the end of May, that gives you a window in which you could say we have this much time at the beginning of our season as it's supposed to start. Can we do that? And if they get to it and they say we can't do that right now because look at the trends, look at what we predict is going to happen, look at what is happening. Maybe though you have a better idea of we need at least this much time, and we really don't know. Like Fowler said, informed speculation. It does seem increasingly unlikely that things are going to start right on time. There's still a chance they could be later, maybe much later. We'll just have to see. But I thought it was very interesting and some very good points because there are so many complexities, so many layers to the whole thing.
Yeah, and Chris, as we sort of get into what the options might actually be, I think, like you said, that there are layers, there are a number of different things, and it starts with, to Chris Fowler's point, not Chris Clark's point, but it starts with the fact that all these different states are making decisions on when school is going to be back in separately. So, like you said, these are not professional athletes where a league is making a decision and they'll, meet with the players union and they'll figure out sort of that that spot where safety and making millions of dollars sort of cross over basically. These are student athletes and they're going to be in school and South Carolina made decisions to stop going to school in person at one point in this timeline. Georgia made the decision at a different point in this timeline. North Carolina made it at a separate point as well. So there's no one sort of entity making these decisions, I think is the first part. And then two, it becomes a matter of professional athletes can make the professional decision for their own health and well-being, whether they're ready and willing to play or not. Whereas college athletes, you really can't put them in if there's any situation where you feel like you're putting them in danger, you just can't do it. So there have been some sort of tone deaf comments from some college coaches, I think, but that's just the fact of the whole matter. But if you look ahead, Fowler said basically there's three options. One, obviously the one everybody wants and hopes is possible, is to start on time. For South Carolina, that means September 5th, kick it off against Coastal. And that basically means by July 13th or so, that weekend, that everybody is back, at least able to go to school, that you start team activities, that you have basically 4 weeks of summer workouts, and then you have 4 weeks of practice time, and then you kick it off like normal. Like you said, maybe the least likely of the possibilities right now. Second option is that you have the season sort of as normal, but it is slightly delayed. Dude, I could even see a scenario, even if you delayed the season a month, there's that huge break at the end where normally we're doing bowl games and we're getting ready. There's a huge break before college football playoff and then another break before the national championship. Even if we start a month late, you could have the entire season, I believe, still play out. Now, within that option, you sort of have a situation where you say, okay, play the season late and play the entire season, or play the season late and it's an abbreviated season. It's a conference only. It's however you want to do it. There's a infinite number of different ways you could probably do it within that parameter. And then C, the one that will get the most just sort of, I think, feedback with people either loving it or hating it, is the possibility of playing in the spring. And that is the one to me that becomes an option when the only other option is that there's not a season. Then all of a sudden playing in the spring becomes a massive win, actually, because it beats the alternative by a good margin. And I think everybody is seeing, hey, we have to have football to prop up these athletic departments financially. And, frankly, I think we need football just for the psyche of the American sports fan at this point. But that brings its own just load of questions as well. So What are your thoughts, Chris? And I see your questions on Facebook, y'all. We're going to get to them. Chris, what are your thoughts on the three options?
It's sort of hard for me to envision the season starting on time right now because, and it really has nothing to do. I mean, maybe we get to the end of May and things are just extremely stable numbers wise across the country for the coronavirus. Man, I hope so for many reasons. Number one is so that people are healthy across the country. But that's not the only consideration. You have to, they have to track, is it going to come back? Is there a vaccine? Is there immunity? Is there testing? You got all these different things. And so that's one reason, just for the public health concern. But your second part of it is your financial consideration, because, if you want to be able to play this season with fans in the stands, and that's why they are going over these different scenarios. It's all about, when can we put the players out there, number one, right? I mean, that's the most important thing. But, when you're talking about two football teams playing a game somewhere, say at Williams-Brice, I mean, how many people there that would be essential personnel? That means players, coaches, administrators, referees, medical officials. I mean, how many people? 300, 400, I don't know, something like that, versus 80,000, plus all those people. It's a smaller number, so you could argue it's easier to control. But here's the thing about that. That's no fans in the stands. And so that is a huge revenue lost opportunity. And so that's why we're seeing, okay, when can we put the players out there, just by themselves? That's not as ideal a scenario, because then you're losing out. You get TV money under that scenario, but you've got the public health, issues with just the players and coaches themselves. But then you got the lost revenue from having 80,000 fans in the stands, the ticket sales, the concessions, plus the TV money. And so that's why, for the point you said, Wes, this is such a potential for devastation financially for these athletic departments. That's why they're looking at these scenarios. When can we actually have fans in stands again? Football has to be used to prop up the departments. Just like you said, you look at a big school, even a South Carolina, football drives everything from a financial standpoint. So then, and South Carolina is in good shape financially as an athletic department. There are a lot of schools that are not, they're out there operating in the red. Then you're talking about, you lose out on football revenue, you lose out on, and that's why, I mean, not having a season almost isn't even an option. That's why they're going, we're going to do something to have a season so we can get some sort of revenue, but you want to maximize that. If you're the NCAA, if you're the SEC, if you're these member institutions, if you can maximize it, then you're in a better position, even if you have to push it and survive for a little while. These small schools who are relying on these checks, a Coastal Carolina, however much they're making to go play South Carolina, or you talk about an FCS school or whatever going to play somebody, how much they're getting in a guarantee. Sometimes you're talking about $900,000, $1 million, and it's funding the AD. But even for South Carolina or a big school, you're losing out on that much revenue. It's very difficult. And so I think it's either going to be later or even the spring football that you mentioned. And that's not me being pessimistic about it at all. I hope football's here as soon as possible. But it's sort of hard to see, absent a vaccine, or which I don't think we're going to have at the beginning of the football season. Or, I just feel like it's going to take more time for everything to get situated. And I feel like the ideal scenario for everyone is to have fans in the stands. So that's probably why it's going to take longer, in my opinion. I could be wrong about that, but that's sort of what I think of it.
Yeah, a lot to work through, man, and just a lot for everybody to consider. Looks like our Facebook Live is going strong. I appreciate all of you guys and girls joining. I see Warlick is on here. He actually has our first question. Rooster Louie is here. Let's see, David Porter in here, Brandon Jordan, Mr. Gutierrez, no problem. We are glad to do it. Rob Profit in the house. Let's see, Ryan Branham. Let's see, my girlfriend is on. Wendy Goss is on. That's my cousin from back home. Philip Pugh, good friend of mine, big Gamecock fan. So shout out to everybody for joining us. Where's everybody from? How about that? Where is everybody joining us from? Who's the farthest away that is on? our chat. Chris, let's start. Warlick is kicking us off with a question that is not football related, but I don't have an answer for this one, so I'll ask you. Have you watched Tiger King yet? I've watched like maybe 10, 15 minutes of it, and I cut it off. I guess I'm going to have to give it another shot because everybody's talking about it. I don't know if I'm necessarily looking forward to watching it. Honestly, it kind of makes me a little uncomfortable, but have you watched Tiger King, Chris?
I've not finished an episode. I'm about where you are. I'm thinking I'm about maybe 30 minutes in. Cut it on one night. Couldn't pay a ton of attention that night, and haven't restarted it. And really, I do want to catch up on it. I've just my focus right now is on Ozark. Still in season 1, but it's really really good. Still trying to work on Bloodline a little bit. I'm only about 5 or 6 episodes into that, and then Homeland, which is every Sunday on Showtime. It's the final season, and it's awesome right now. And so I caught up on another episode of that last night. So I've got about 3 shows occupying my attention. That's about all I've got time for right now. So Tiger King's on the list.
Yeah, we're flying through Homeland. So
where are you at now?
How many seasons are there total?
It's on 8, and 8's the last one. There's 8.
Oh my God. Okay, so we're on season 2. We've been, I don't know about y'all, but other than eating for Easter yesterday, like the productivity on Easter Sunday was just nothing. So we flew through. I don't even want to say publicly how many episodes of Homeland that I probably watched yesterday. So yeah, that's a good one if y'all are looking for something to watch. It's awesome. It's on Hulu, which I didn't realize that. I thought it was just on Showtime, but it is on Hulu. Yeah, so we got a lot of people weighing in. Anderson, hey, that's Chris's hometown, Anderson, South Carolina. Inman, South Carolina. Let's see. Justin Hall is on. What's up, Justin? Joel T. Brown. I hope season gets to play out. Me too, buddy. John Michael is from Monk's Corner. That is the home of Brian Shoemaker, the owner of Gamecock Central. Stephen Highfield says if we go into fall, if all this goes into the fall, no one's going to have any money for football anyway. That's a really good point. Yeah. Jordan's in from Greenville. Jay McClary is in from Utah. That might be the farthest anyone here is joining us. So, Jay, if anybody is farther away from Utah, put it in the comment. Jay, shoot us a direct message on the Gamecock Central account, and I will throw you a free subscription for a month to Gamecock Central. We're going to do some giveaways while we're at it. Josh Yellman is on, a very, very dedicated worker over at one of the.
Oh, man. What's up, Josh?
Josh, we miss you too, buddy. All right, let's hit a couple questions and we'll go back to spring football. Ryder Tipton says, with the state's recruiting down across the board this cycle, plus Muschamp's hot seat, et cetera, what would you consider at this time a reasonable expectation for 2020 South? It got cut off, but I'm going to just guess that, Chris, that he was want to know an expectation for this recruiting class in 2020, which the class is off to a pretty solid start. 4 commitments at this point. One of those guys being a true 4-star type, and Colton Gauthier, the quarterback. We'll talk about him in a little bit as far as showing you some highlights of him. But I think we're starting to get to the point, Chris, where we have a decent feel for what this class may look like, at least as far as, I don't know, man, maybe the next 4 or 5, 6 guys that are most likely. Still very early to know how the class is going to fill out. But what are your thoughts, man, on the realistic expectations? I don't think personally we can go into this class saying it's going to be like a top 15 class nationally. I'd be a little bit surprised if that happens. I think this is going to have to be an evaluation class. They're going to have to out-evaluate some guys and get in ahead of other schools and then sort of go from there. But I think if this ends up being a top 25 class, throughout the different recruiting services, then that's really a big win for South Carolina.
That's what I would say. Top 25 is what you're thinking. Now, that the biggest thing for South Carolina to me, I'll back up. So we knew going into this year, and it really has nothing to do with the in-person recruiting shutdown. It really doesn't. We knew that this was going to be, in all likelihood, a slower build in terms of the class because of the reasons that person who asked the question laid out. I mean, dead on. You've got a hot seat situation that's not just some people writing it in a magazine or online. You got the sitting president of the university doing it last year. And so that hurt. And they tried to smooth that over publicly, but it's out there now. And it affected the last class. They held it together. But it's going to affect, you start looking forward, and it's affected this class some. And then you got the fact that South Carolina won 4 games last year, which helped, lead to the hot seat stuff as well. So all that adds up to, it's going to be a tougher year, and has been a tougher year in terms of gaining a bunch of spring or summer commitments. Then you got no summer camps. I mean, every year that we've covered Will Muschamp at South Carolina, summer camps have been significant in one way or another. One reason being they typically find some guys at camp that they like, or they're able to get some guys in at camp and sort of advance things with them and land their commitment either around that time or later. I mean, heck, there's, you think about Joey Hunter last cycle. He was a guy that committed not too long after working out at camp and getting an offer. O'Donnell Fortune, Trey Jones from in-state committed on the spot after getting a camp offer. So those dynamics aren't there. And then, you got just the lack of, the on-field questions really is going to prevent some guys from pulling the trigger earlier too. So there won't be as many spring or summer commitments. And so from that standpoint, I think to get a guy like Colton Gauthier is certainly a positive, and continue trying to build it out through the summer as best you can. The biggest key in my book, Wes, for Carolina this cycle, they need some guys to wait it out. They need to get to the season eventually, whenever that may be, play football, go win some games. I mean, that's going to be the best medicine for all this, just to get more stability, to be able to point to that and say, look, things are back on track. We had a year that was not very good. Now we're back on track. Because there are still a lot of guys interested in South Carolina or interested in playing for the coaching staff, but some of them want to make sure the staff's going to be in place. And so that's really what it's all about, and that's what they have to do.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Next question here from my good buddy Robbie Prophet, who is also breaking down film on Twitter for you Gamecock Twitter folks. Robbie says, who do you guys compare? I know Chris likes doing comparisons. So who do you guys compare the new defensive tackle commit to? What's his skill set like? Is he a power gap pushing defensive tackle, a nose tackle, or a backside athletic type defensive tackle? I'm going to get some of his highlights playing here in a second while we talk. But, Chris, I would say, we talked about him a little bit last week when we did this. I would say that to me, he's definitely a kid who's more fits into that maybe true nose tackle or, one technique. Not saying he's not athletic enough to do some other things, but just more comparatively to what we've seen South Carolina get on the defensive line the last couple of classes. Most of their defensive linemen have been guys that, even the interior guys have been ones that have sort of maybe grown into that position or are more like 3 technique. Zach Pickens, there was question in high school whether he was going to be a defensive end or a defensive tackle. Now he showed up, I think 290 or so pounds, and it was immediately clear he was going to be a defensive tackle. But generally these guys that are already 320 pounds or whatever Nick Barrett is, as productive as he is, I think he's more of a kid that's going to, just hold up against the run for you and play right there in the middle, and then maybe let some of these other guys make plays around him.
Yeah, and so I will at least attempt to answer the comparison question. I'm not sure if I got anybody from a Carolina standpoint that he, maybe like Kobe Smith-esque in terms of like what he can do, body composition maybe. Another guy, former North Carolina guy who played for Tracy Rocker at Tennessee, Shy Tuttle, maybe body type wise. I think Tuttle was about 6'2", 310 or so out of high school. Barrett's about 6'2", 6'3", 320 or so. So maybe along those lines in terms of just body composition. I talked to his high school coach Coach Oates, and we have a piece up right now on GamecockCentral.com if you want to check that out. That sort of breaks down Barrett's game. And I asked that question to his coach. I said, look, how do you think Nick can be used in college? And he said that he thought he could be a zero technique nose guard type because he's gotten a lot stronger, over the past few years in the weight room, and that he could hold up in a setting like that. But also that he was athletic enough to be, an attacking type who can shade off of a center or an offensive guard and go make some plays. But he certainly, to me, Wes, looks like a guy that has enough versatility, but in South Carolina's scheme, maybe that guy that, like you said, can be a nose type who can go fight off some double teams and help create space for linebackers.
Yeah, I think, man, you really start to see how Carolina has been able to stack classes on the defensive line the last couple of years. Zach Pickens, is a guy who now be in his second year in the program. So that's, talking in terms of the 2021 class right now, you're talking about Pickens being 3 classes ago, Jordan Burch being last class, and then this class, adding a guy like Nick Barrett in. You look at Rick Sandage a few classes ago. You look at Joseph Anderson. Just the number of talented kids they've been able to get on the defensive front. You start to see that pay off, I think, last year. And even though you're going to miss a Javon Kinlaw, we all know, quite a bit. Javon should be, a top 15, top 20 pick next week with this virtual NFL draft. They're going to miss him. There's no doubt. But I think you start to look at what they have replacing him on the front. And then going into the year after that, when Nick Barrett, will be a true freshman, you look at Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins there in Gaffney, who I think South Carolina has a good shot with. TJ Sanders in Marion, who I think they have a good shot with. Then, you start looking at Javari Ritzy out of North Carolina, someone there that's a very highly recruited kid that they're at least in on. You really like how it sets up as far as South Carolina goes and as far as their recruiting on the defensive front. Chris, let's go back into spring football for a second. And the idea of spring football, for me, I think the question becomes, how does that look after you're done? Are we, if we do that, are we talking about having spring football? And obviously we're talking about 2021. You'd kick off, I don't know, January, February, whatever. Are we going to turn around and play our actual 2021 season in September? Are we playing 2 times? Do you maybe abbreviate both seasons to maybe lessen the strain on these guys a little bit? That was a discussion on our message board there on Gamecock Central, was can you actually ask guys to play 2 seasons in 1 calendar year? I think there's ways to do that. If you abbreviate both seasons, if you take out your traditional spring practice, maybe give them a longer break, NCAA can just say, look, you got to give the kids an entire month off during the summer or something. Give them a massive break where you can't even, they can't do anything. I think that's possible.
It is. And, again, I feel like it's like broken record territory now, like a pull string toy or whatever, but like it depends on when it is. So when we say spring, that can be, like, I know one of the scenarios that's been discussed, really it could start at any time. We talk about anywhere from September until whenever is really on the table, right? But let's say we call it spring football, but it starts in late January, instead of March, which would be great, right? I mean, that'd be good because it's even earlier. But under that scenario, let's say like the first, we're just spitballing here, the first college football game is January 25th. That's spring football. For next, actually, no, that would not be the right date. We need to go into 2021. I'm using the wrong calendar. Let's say it's January 23rd. The 2020 season is going to begin in 2021 on January 23rd. What you'd probably see under that scenario, say probably because we don't know, but you have to find a way to shorten the season. So it'd be conference only, right? So how would that work out with all these guarantees for non-conferences? Would they try to keep a rivalry game? I don't know. But the priority would be playing conference games. And so what you would get then is you would get, 8 weeks. Don't you think, Wes? Maybe 8 weeks. Well, you definitely get 8 games, and then you get a bye week, one bye week maybe, since it's a shortened season.
Yeah.
So let's say January 23rd, 30th, and then you get 5 weeks in February. That's 7, and then March 6th to March 13th. And then maybe you go play a conference title game 2 weeks after. So maybe by the end of April, beginning of May, you can have everything done, including the college football playoff. So spring ball is out for the next year. You have no spring practice that next year, and then you get the players a layoff, and you start the summer and the preseason later. And then you try to go have a regular season the next year, regular in terms of length and start date. That would be my guess, because even if you shorten it, even if you can start this spring football, quote unquote, in late January, then you're still going to need 9 weeks for a conference season and 1 bye, unless you're asking them to play 8 games without a bye. I highly doubt that. And then you're going to need a layoff between college football playoff. You're probably going to still have a conference title game and all those things. And so that probably puts you into May. And if that's the case, you're still going to have to change the recruiting calendar a little bit for the next year, and you're still going to have to really change around the structure of leading into the following season.
Yeah, and you're going to really need the NFL to play along with you.
Yeah.
And
right.
And push the draft back, right? At this point, I don't know if you're going to have possibly, kids that are juniors right now, or seniors right now saying, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm not playing spring ball if the draft is coming up, right? In April or
Great
whatever."
question. Yeah, great point. If they do push it back to say, I don't know, because then you're not giving guys very long to prepare for the draft.
Well, there's no time to prepare for the draft. Like it's
even if you put the draft, let's say the scenario that's very hypothetical that I laid out, the national title game is May, whatever, beginning of May. If the NFL says, "Cool guys, the draft's July 1st," it's not a lot of time, even if they do push it back, because you don't want the draft to be right on the heels of the actual NFL season too. So that's a great point I didn't even think of. But yeah, it would seem like they'd have to be willing to play together, to work together on that. But there needs to be some kind of window, and that's just one of the many considerations they're going to have to give. And if they don't push it back a ton, or any guys can actually sit out, I sort of doubt it. I don't think there'd be a lot of that, because guys generally need as much tape as they can get to maximize their stock. But it is another intriguing part of it.
Yeah, well, if you, basically your draft preparation in that scenario is your season, basically. Okay, yeah. Are we used to having all this NFL combine crap and measuring everybody's hands and doing a combine, and then all these stupid pro days and just all this crap that we do right now and hype up? We're used to that. But dude, Major League Baseball holds a draft during college baseball season. So I can never see the NFL doing that, because for one, the NFL markets their draft to where it is a viewing, it's like must-see TV if you're a big football fan. So
Sure.
You're not going to want to sort of take away from that. But you'd basically, I believe, you just have a lead in to where, you're doing the draft right at the end of college football. And I don't know, man, maybe everybody sends out virtual workouts or something, or you have a bunch of, I don't know how you do it, but I think the point is, though, even though we don't know how this is going to look, Chris, is that everybody involved is probably very motivated to find a way. Because right now, so many different people, and we can talk about it directly as far as a football program and the amount of money that comes in and out of a football program. Then we can talk about it directly as far as the entire athletic department. And if you look at one of those charts of the sports that make money and the sports that lose money, you'll quickly see that football is propping up a large percentage of your athletic department. And then, dude, go into all the different people that football indirectly affects. I'm talking about your restaurants and bars, which we hope are at some point going to be open to actually go and sit down and enjoy again. All your different media websites and stuff like us to talk about the games. Your sports networks, which right now have these massive, just multi-million-dollar contracts where they've paid for the rights to broadcast games that aren't happening right now. I mean, I can go on. I'm sure there's probably 1,000 different businesses or business types, I should say, that are affected indirectly by the economic input of football and all this different stuff. So, point being, when there's this many people with this much money involved, you're going to find a way. We just don't quite yet know what way and when this is going to happen. But I feel pretty comfortable at some point, dude, no matter what it looks like. There's going to be a season that has the number 2020 stamped on it, whether it's right now or whether it's in the fall or whether it's not, man.
Yeah, the 2020 season of 2021 maybe. But, I think, I think a lot at the beginning because of the unknown, which there's still a ton of it. Some of us are like, are they going to have to cancel an entire football season? And I think I won't say we, I'll say me. I'll just put myself in it. I maybe didn't think it through as much. I mean, obviously, I thought about the financial implications, but when you continue digging into it, you realize just how much is at stake. To where, all right, they're going to have to figure out they canceling the season is almost not an option, right? I mean, it's not feasible. So what they're going to have to do is strike a balance between public safety, player safety, all those things. Secondary things like the NFL and recruiting calendar, all that, but they got to strike a balance between the safety and the economics of it all. And I really think that one of the big factors for everybody involved is going to be when we restart, how are we maximizing the revenue? Because what you don't want to do is restart and have to stop. And you also don't want to restart and have not maxed out your revenue opportunities. And so that's why there's probably more of a push to, okay, when can we get fans in the stands for the reasons that we outlined? That's your maximum revenue opportunity, is when you bring fans into the picture, and secondarily the restaurants and all those that you mentioned. That's your greatest economic impact in terms of restarting the economy and the economy of college football. Having the games on TV is awesome. And, the TV money is good for the universities, but it's just a small piece of the pie.
Definitely, man. Yeah, and appreciate all you guys and girls joining us. We're still 62 strong, I think, on our feed right now. So keep hitting us with the questions. Ernest Miller says, "What are the biggest strengths going into the season for this team?" I tell you, man, the more we've talked, and we've had a lot of time. Let's be honest, we've had a lot of time to just BS about the roster and what it looks like and the structure of it and strengths and weaknesses and all this stuff. The more we've talked it out about this team and what the strengths are, what the weaknesses are, Chris, I find myself actually feeling like South Carolina, is, whenever a season happens, is going to be pretty good defensively. Like we talked about earlier, I think the defensive line is in a good spot. I think the linebacker group is underrated. I think the corners, with the guys you have now, J.C. Horn, Izzy Muschamp being veteran juniors who have played a bunch. I even think safety will be much improved this year. I think the defense as a whole is a group that we're not maybe talking about as much. Certainly not getting a ton of pub, conference wide right now. But I think the defense is going to be solid. But just as much as I feel a little bit better about saying that now than maybe I did a couple months ago, I do think there are real concerns about the offense. I think you hear that the offensive line play is maybe going to be the strength of that offense, but I think you get into a concern we've talked about ad nauseum all offseason is the wide receivers, and just are there enough playmakers within this group for South Carolina to be in good shape, to feel like they have a pretty good offense. So to me, the strength, I believe, is going to be just the defense as a whole and the veterans there. little bit more depth there. And then to sort of take it a step further, your concern for me is just offensive playmakers.
I think you hit it. Defensively, losing Javon Kinlaw, he's, at this point, a little bit more of like a rare player, for South Carolina when you look at what he could do, what he blossomed into. I think South Carolina can be fine there as long as Zach Pickens and Rick Sandage continue to come along, and they certainly can. Pickens being a sophomore and Sandage going into his junior year, those guys have a really good opportunity to take a step forward. Are either of them going to be Kinlaw? Probably not. But they could develop into good players there for sure. And they've already done some nice things for this team. The back end, to me, you still got to figure out safety is one of those moves. Smith, Johnny Dixon were playing pretty well in spring. It seems like the staff have been pretty happy with them. So if they could slot one of those guys at a corner spot, that gives you more flexibility. Ernest Jones, I like. Sherrod Green was playing well in the spring from what we hear, before things got shut down. So I'm with you. Defensively, I think you feel pretty good about it. I think special teams wise, maybe some questions with losing Joe Charlton. But offensively, yeah, I mean, that's it. I don't think South Carolina has recruited quite as poorly at wide receiver as it's shown. I mean, you are what you are in terms of production, but when you look at just the melting pot of things that have gone into the offensive struggles, I think they're going to have to be more consistent in the run game. They're going to have better quarterback play. Mike Bobo's system, I think, could help in terms of just structure of the offense, play calling, all those things. And then the receivers have got to take a step forward. I mean, that's the bottom line. And you lose Brian Edwards, who was super productive. You lost Debo Samuel the year before. So it's all about having some guys step up. And I'm with you. There's still a concern on speed. There's still a concern on playmaking and just proven guys. So they're going to have some guys step up. I think Marshawn Lloyd, Zaquandre White, if he gets in, has a great opportunity.
Yeah, all right. So let's hit another question here. Again, appreciate y'all guys joining us. Rod Nelson wants to know if they're going after a 5 or 4-star linebacker that can come in and play right away. I don't know, Chris. There's necessarily like a super highly recruited guy that we're tracking as far as feeling like they're in great shape with. If you look at the linebackers that they're both targeting heavily and are really considering them, and Ryder makes a good point. I'd say Greg Penn from DeMatha, I believe, is maybe the most highly recruited. Chris, what is he the guy that's highest, I guess, rated right now among the guys?
Penn would be the highest rated. Trinilius Tatum out of Georgia, is a 4-star guy. That's another one that I would say keep an eye on. It's a guy that South Carolina likes, that has reciprocated, that interest so far. Rhaenyra Dilworth out of North Carolina is a high 3-star, almost a 4, but he looks like he's down to Alabama, North Carolina. He's been a guy that South Carolina likes a lot too, but so far not a lot of traction there. So yeah, I would say Penn and Tatum, would be the 4-star type guys that South Carolina is targeting, that they've had on campus and have a shot with right now.
All right, yeah, definitely. Let's try to get through these, Chris. William Yex, William, appreciate the question. He says odds on Colin Hill getting playing time this year. Dakereon Joyner playing time at receiver. Question mark. What are the odds on these happening? I'll start with the second one first. You're definitely going to see Dakereon Joyner get time at receiver. We saw him basically be the second team slot receiver last year, even though he really only had a few weeks to get ready at playing receiver after he lost the initial backup quarterback battle. So he was playing hurt. He was playing 2 possessions, and he still managed to get on the field some last year. So Joyner's on the field, maybe a starter, definitely a guy that rotates in. And, I think he's a slot receiver. And so that's going to depend on some other guys that does Josh Van continue to come on, and have the offseason he needs. Does Shi Smith play outside receiver or inside at slot? Where do these different guys sort of end up within the confines of the receiver room? I think is going to be a big part of that. But if Joyner can make plays, man, they're going to find a way to get him on the field at receiver. So, I think he'll be a guy at slot, and he's definitely going to play a lot. And we'll see how much, or how much of an impact he can make. Colin Hill playing time, I think we maybe would have given a slightly different answer depending on what timeline we were on. Maybe a few months ago, Colin Hill is a guy, Chris, that we've said multiple times has not come to South Carolina just to hang out and be a coach on the field. He's come in to try and be the starter, and I think he's going to push Ryan Helinski. I think he's going to be a great sort of knowledge resource for Ryan Helinski. Right now, I'd probably put my money on Ryan being the guy, being the starter. But I think to answer that question, does he play at some point? Yes, I think Colin Hill gets on the field at some point this season. Whether he's the guy and the starter, I think right now you would probably still circle Ryan Helinski as being the guy as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was maybe a little bit more up in the air, a while before spring, but Ryan Helinski had a really good spring. Obviously, Colin Hill couldn't participate as he continues to rehab his knee, and he still may have a say during the preseason, if there is a preseason or whenever that is. But Ryan was playing well in the 5 spring practices. I think he had a good lead up to spring. He was playing well during the spring. Seemed to take well to Mike Bobo and his system, and just based on what you don't know for sure at this point, at this early point, but based on just some sort of nuggets we've heard and picked up along the way, it seems like the wind's blowing a little bit more in the Ryan Helinski direction, that he's sort of taken that and run with it a little bit more. But there's still some time, before we get things cranked back up. We don't really know when that is, and I think we'll have a better sense then. But I would say that Colin at some point is going to play this year, but we just don't know what type of role that is. I'd say right now it's more likely to be in a backup role, but that's where we're sitting right now.
Yeah, good stuff. Jeff Henry, good question here. What's your feel on Muschamp getting another season after this one, just because how this season is going to play out? Obviously, probably not a full year. You lost spring practice, and who knows how much time they get before our 2020 season actually starts. I feel like he will get another year regardless. It's going to be tough to gauge anything, in my opinion. Thanks, guys. Stay safe. Appreciate the question, Jeff. I think it's a valid point, man. I mean, again, what's going to happen after this season, I believe has always been something that's going to be determined not necessarily by the exact record, but by how South Carolina plays on the field. Do they improve as the year goes on? Obviously, if they have a really good year, then that solidifies everything, and Muschamp is back. If they have, a mediocre type year, then I think it 100% is going to depend on the makeup of the team, what's coming back. Do they look improved? Do they lose close games where one guy can make a difference? Do they lose blowout games? There's so many different factors. And to your point, Jeff, now you have all these external factors as well. If South Carolina went 6-6 and really had an up and down year, then there's a lot of factors involved in that decision anyway. But now, like you said, you have all these different factors that play in, and then the fact, dude, what does the recruiting class look like at that time? How has recruiting been affected by everything else going on? I'll say this: whichever programs can deal with all these external factors the best are going to be the ones that are able to somehow still succeed given everything that's going on. But let's keep rolling through them. Wesley Hodge says, who's the starting running back for game 1, whenever that may be? Wesley, I am going to say, good name, by the way. I'm going to say that Mr. Marshawn Lloyd will be the guy. Feel pretty comfortable, pretty confident. If he is healthy, then he will take the first snap of the season, whenever that snap may be. Chris, are you 100% with me, or do you maybe have another guy?
That's who I'd pick too. I don't know if I'm 100% on it yet because of the questions that I have. Does he need to prepare more mentally? Is he going to get enough time to do that? Probably, because there will be some sort of buffer zone. They're not just going to throw him out there in game 1, whenever game 1 is, and say, all right, good luck, guys. There is going to be some kind of practice and, a preparation period for these guys to lead up. But I think he's the most talented guy and especially when you're just talking about here's the ball, go get some yardage. I think he's the guy.
Yep. So let's roll through again. One more question here. If y'all have any final questions, go ahead and hit them. We'll try to fly through. William Yex says, who could be our, quote, big body receiver that could have an impact? Leggett, Caldwell, or Mike Wyman? I think you ordered them pretty well there, William. I would give them the best chance of making an impact in that exact order that you have. Leggett, Caldwell, then Wyman. I will say this. They have told Jakari Caldwell, be ready, that we're going to give you every chance to come in and play, that we're going to give you every chance to be the guy. At the very least, I think these guys need to find a way to be ready to play, at least in reserve roles, and provide depth. And maybe as the season goes along, your freshmen can help you a little bit more. But to me, we've talked about receivers a ton this offseason, and Leggett is one of the guys that you just consistently say he's got the body type to do what you're talking about. He's got the athleticism to do what you're talking about. He came in a little bit raw as a wide receiver, but to me, he's the one that if South Carolina is going to be pretty good on offense, you need for Leggett to have a really good offseason and to put himself in that position to help the team. So I think you ordered them well. If Leggett can be a consistent threat for South Carolina, and then you start talking about him, Shi Smith, like we talked about earlier, Kerryon Joyner, Ortre Smith, the freshman, Josh Vann. Then all of a sudden you start to sort of see what Chris is talking about, and that's that maybe the receiver room isn't as bad as people say it is. I think. Chris, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I still love Leggett's upside because he's a guy that's big and can run. And he had some inconsistencies, mainly just because he was raw last year, but just he was capable of making some highlight reel type catches in practice or even in game situations. He just has to be more consistent there too. And a lot of it's just learning about how to play the receiver position. It's not something that he's done full time during his high school career or in college. And so he's made strides there. And from an athleticism upside standpoint, I think is substantial. He's just got to continue coming along. And that's one reason. I mean, he's another one of the reasons I look at it and I look around that room and I go, this needs to be a better unit from a talent standpoint. Josh Vann's another one. It wasn't mentioned in the question, but I'll say it till I'm blue in the face. I think Josh Vann's a better player than what he's shown. He had a bad slump last year, had a case of the drops last year. I don't really know why, but if he can turn it around and do more consistently what he's shown flashes of being able to do, then that's a huge boost for South Carolina. So is Leggett.
Definitely, man. Let's hit our final question here from Connor. What is the key to more wins? Red zone offense or third down defense? Can you go all the above? I mean, I don't know if there's any one key, Connor. I mean, I think there are definitely multiple areas of improvement. I don't have the third down numbers in front of me for defense last year. I do know that red zone offense was a struggle for South Carolina last year. I don't need the numbers to be reminded of that. And you know what? That was a key that South Carolina itself propped up going into the year. Not just scoring in the red zone, but more so scoring touchdowns in the red zone. And that was something that didn't necessarily happen, and something that I think if you look at Mike Bobo and having a lot of the answers you need to have in the red zone, I think, for the most part, players make plays, and it's about having guys who can go make plays for you. But I think when play calling can really make a difference, it is in those third down situations on offense, in those red zone situations. The field gets tightened up. You're throwing into tighter windows. You have safeties that are closer to the box just naturally because it's a smaller section of the field that you have to work with. So play calling and maybe scheming a guy open, getting the right call on can be so important down there. So I think that's something where Mike Bobo can make a difference. If you're going to make me pick one of those things, that both those things are always a key. That's like, to me, if you have two close, like sort of closely talented teams as far as the amount of talent on both teams, and you go into a game turnovers and winning the turnover battle, I believe, is the single biggest key to a win or a loss. But then I think you get into who scores touchdowns, who kicks field goals, third down defense, third down offense. So those are obviously that's maybe right after that. I think is who kicks field goals, and or who can convert on third down is right after the red zone offense thing, in my opinion. So all those things are keys, man. But if you made me pick one that South Carolina needs the most as far as improvement, I would say if they could be an efficient offense that can run the football and score touchdowns at a higher clip than they did last year when they get to the red zone, then that's going to be a pretty good recipe for them, because then they can possess the ball, put their defense in a better spot. That was one thing, Chris, for me last year. I felt like not only did the offense not put up points late in the year, which is a big enough issue in its own right, that the offense consistently put the defense in bad spots. So what you're doing there is taking a bad problem and making it even worse.
Yeah, I would be on the red zone offense train as well, just in general, and to South Carolina, because one of the reasons is what you said. You can look at some games where the defense played well, and if you didn't watch the game and you look at the box score, you go, the defense didn't play very well. Texas A&M, for example, but South Carolina's complete inability to do anything offensively in that game, it ends up affecting your defense. And so then, whereas maybe you're pretty good on third down defense at the beginning of the game, it starts to slip, and you give up a couple late touchdowns and you don't look as good in the stat category there. So look back at last season. I mean, South Carolina was 56 nationally in red zone percentage, or not red zone, in third down conversions on defense. They were at 36%. That's pretty good. It's not wonderful, but I really attribute some of that to the offense. If you've got a good offense on that South Carolina team, that number is probably good. Now you take it to red zone offense, South Carolina is 105th nationally. They were there 34 times. They only scored touchdowns half of those times, and then they kicked 9 field goals. So they're 77% overall scoring, and then half the times they got down there, they're coming away with field goal attempts instead of touchdowns. So that's huge. And then look across the conference, two teams that also struggled actually even worse than South Carolina, or 3 teams in the red zone: Arkansas, Missouri, and Vanderbilt. And none of those teams had a very good year either. So I think there's a huge correlation, causation, whatever you want to call it, between red zone offense. I mean, you've got to be good there. And another one I'd throw in there is just third down conversions on offense, just in general. That's an area. I mean, Will Muschamp talked about it a lot. He talks about both those things. When we get down in the red zone, we got to score, but to get to the red zone, West, you either got to create explosive plays or you got to move the chains. And South Carolina was even worse in just third down on offense in general than red zone. They were 120th nationally in third downs offensively and only converted 32% last year. And let's look there. Only Vandy in the SEC was worse. So that's a number that, I mean, they got to improve all those numbers. But to me, the offensive numbers, the third down conversions offensively, and then red zone on offense, those are the ones they've got to fix.
Yeah, definitely. No doubt, man. Have we hit, Chris, do you think we've hit everything we need to hit today? I mean, yeah. I think, we were going to go through some videos and some highlights and stuff, but we've gone like an hour. So maybe we just save that for another day. This has been great. We've had good feedback, good engagement as far as people being involved in this. So, guys, if you want to, please go subscribe to our YouTube as well. And we're going to sort of, depending on the day and depending on how things are going, we're going to sort of rotate this around and try to put it on our different social media stuff. And then we'll upload the on-demand video after the fact. But if you want to, chat with us live, some days we'll do it on Facebook. Other days we'll do it on YouTube. Even looking into maybe doing some Instagram live stuff on there. I know they've got a pretty cool feature there. So, we'll keep hanging in there with you, and hopefully we can sort of get through all this crap together. I know we're all sitting at home, working at home. Hopefully we can get you away from work for a second and talk a little bit of football. So we're going to continue to do these more and more often. And also, if you're not a subscriber to Gamecock Central, go on there, type in the code Gamecocks. If you sign up for a year, then your first year will be 50% off with the code Gamecocks, so you can actually get in the doors for $50 for the entire year as opposed to $100. Chris, you got any closing thoughts, man?
I think I'm good, man. This was fun. Appreciate all the engagement and the comments and the questions from everyone.
Definitely. All right. So for Chris Clark, I'm Wes Mitchell. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to our podcast and all that stuff. And thanks for continuing to follow your Gamecock news on Gamecock Central. And thanks for supporting us with our virtual concert on Saturday as well. I should have mentioned that off top, but $3,400 raised to go to Coach Muschamp's fund. And I had a blast on Saturday. I hope those of you who joined us had a blast as well. And you can still donate to the Feed Our Heroes Fund if you want. Just go to if you go to GamecockCentral.com and hit football, that's probably the easiest way to find that link right now. But you can still donate. And again, we appreciate it. For Chris Clark, I'm Wes Mitchell. We'll see you all later.